The greatest truth in human history has been discovered independently by every major civilization on the earth. Not approximately the same truth, the exact same truth. The thing that ends all suffering, the thing that answers the deepest question any human being have ever asked, it got lost in the translation. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, not above you, not after you die, within yourself." Right now, already present, different civilizations, different languages, different centuries, different costumes on the same truth. They were all pointing at the exact same thing. This is the greatest theft in human history. Not of gold, not of land. Of the one thing every human being was always supposed to have direct access to. The most sophisticated human beings who have ever lived arrived at this. And the unanimous verdict is this: once you recognize what you actually are, the suffering loses its ground. So from this episode forward, I'm going to use one word. Not Brahman, not Nirvana, not Christ consciousness. One word: awareness. They were not asking you to believe something. They were asking you to notice something. Something that has been right here your entire life. 5,000 years of brilliant, sincere, deeply realized human beings were all pointing at the same moon. We got distracted by the finger, by the language, by the institution, because what they left was not the truth. What they left was the translation. The truth was never lost. This video today is not about lecturing. It's about what's lost. It's about understanding, realizing, and being with it, that what is actually lost. So in this video, I want to tell you something that took me a long time to fully understand. And the greatest truth in human history has been discovered independently by every major civilization on the earth. Not approximately the same truth, not a similar idea, the exact same truth. And every single time it was discovered, the person who found it tried to share it. And every single time they shared it, it got translated, categorized, institutionalized, complicated, until the original thing was buried so deep under the weight of the language built around it, the most people never find it at all. And here is what that has cost us. The thing that ends all suffering, the thing that answers the deepest question any human being have ever asked, the thing that every sage, every mystic, every enlightened teacher was trying to hand you directly, it got lost in the translation. And today I want to pull it back out. Strip every label, remove every complication, and give it to you in one word. This is episode 22 of the 0600 protocol. This is Lost in Translation. Let me take you on a journey. 2000 to 2500 years ago, a man sat under a tree in India and did not move until he understood the deepest nature of existence. And what he found, he called it Nirvana. Now, most people hear Nirvana and think it means heaven or bliss or some mystical state only available to monks who fast for 40 years. But the literal translation of Nirvana is the extinguishing of the flame, the cessation of the fire of the craving mind. What remains when the mind goes quiet, the pure, still, aware presence that was always beneath that noise. Follow me here, it's important. Around the same time, 5,000 miles away in China, a man named Laozi was writing the most translated text in human history after Bible. He called what he was pointing at the Tao. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. In other words, the thing I am trying to show you cannot be captured by a word. It can only be pointed at. But if you follow the finger instead of grabbing the word, you will find it. That's how you find it. A few centuries later, in the deserts of the Middle East, a man named Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, not above you, not after you die, within yourself. Right now, already present, always whole." At almost the same moment of history, in the forest of India, the Upanishads were declaring, "Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. I am totality. I am not a separate limited person. I am the very ground of existence itself." And then the Greek philosophers, Heraclitus, the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, were calling it the Logos, the universal intelligence, the rational principle underlying all of reality, the thing that every conscious being participates in whether they know it or not. Different civilizations, different languages, different centuries, different costumes on the same truth. They were all pointing at the exact same thing. Now here is where it went wrong. And I want to be precise about this because this is the thing nobody talks about. Every one of these teachers, Buddha, Laozi, Jesus, the Upanishadic seers, was not describing a religion. They were describing a direct experience, a discovery they had made about what a human being actually is. And then what happened? The experience became a doctrine. The discovery became a dogma. The pointing finger became the thing people worshipped instead of looking at what it was pointing at. Buddhism became a religion with a billion rules. The Tao became a philosophy department. The kingdom of heaven became a place you go after death if you behave correctly on this one. Brahman became a caste system. The Logos because academic footnotes. And along the way, the original thing disappeared, buried under Sanskrit, buried under Latin, buried under thousands of years of humans adding complexity to something that was always extraordinary, precisely because of how simple it was. This is the greatest theft in human history, not of gold, not of land, of the one thing every human being was always supposed to have direct access to, the truth of what they are, taken from plain sight and hidden behind walls of terminology, ritual exclusivity, and institutional gatekeeping, so that the very thing that ends all suffering, the thing that was always already here, became something you had to earn, study for, be initiated into, or wait for after death. But here is what I want to sit with, the people who actually found it. Every single one of them said the same additional thing. They said, it is so close you cannot see. It is so simple your mind cannot grasp it. It is so obvious that the searching itself is what keeps you from finding it. Follow me here, because that clue is everything. Let me show you the convergence. Let me put every word side by side. Buddha, Nirvana. Babaji, the Tower. Jesus, the kingdom of heaven within. The Upanishads, Brahman. The Stoics, the Logos. The Sufis, Fana, the dissolution of the ego into the divine. The Zen tradition, Satori, the sudden awakening, the Advaita, Vedanta of India, pure consciousness, Chit, the Jewish, Kabbalah, Ein Sof, the infinite ground, the modern neuroscience, pure consciousness, awareness. Completely different traditions, completely different languages, completely different centuries. And every single description, every single one, is describing something that is always present, unchanged by anything that happens to the mind or body, already complete, already whole, closer to you than your own breath. Impossible to lose, impossible to damage. The ground of everything, the most obvious thing in the universe, and the most overlooked. That is not a coincidence. When the same discovery is made independently by people who had zero contact with each other, across 5 continents, across 5 millennia, in dozens of languages, that is not philosophy. That is the most rigorous replicated finding in the history of human inquiry. More rigorously replicated than any scientific experiment, because the experiment is always the same. The laboratory is always the same. The human being who goes quiet enough to look at what is doing the looking. So from this episode forward, I'm going to use one word. Not Brahman, not Nirvana, not Christ consciousness, not the Tao, not the Logos, not pure consciousness, not any word that has been weighted down by centuries of institutional complications. One word, awareness. Awareness. That is all just awareness. Because awareness is the thing you cannot argue with. It does not belong to a religion. It does not require a teacher. It does not require initiation or ritual or years of study or a specific belief system. You know you are aware right now. This is not a philosophical position. This is the one fact that cannot be questioned. Even the person who questions everything is aware of their questioning. And that awareness, that simple, obvious, always present awareness is what Buddha was pointing at, what Jesus was pointing at, what every sage, every mystic, every enlightened human being in the history of this species was trying to hand you directly. They were not asking you to believe something. They were asking you to notice something that has been right here your entire life, something that requires no qualification to access, something that 5,000 years of religious complexity has been paradoxically hiding in plain sight. Now I know what you might be thinking. This sounds beautiful, but what does this have to do with my life, with my anxiety, my relationships, my bank account, my sense of purpose, everything? And here is why. In episode 21, we talked about the most expensive belief. The belief that you are your body and your mind, and we identified the cost of that belief. Every form of suffering you carry flows directly from that misidentification. Now I'm telling you, that every great tradition in human history found the same correction, the same exit from that suffering, the same recognition that ends the cycle. And they all described it using different words from the exact same thing. You are awareness. You are the one who is aware, not the thought, not the feelings, not the body that's going to die. The awareness that has been witnessing your entire life from the beginning, unchanged, undamaged, unkillable. The most sophisticated human beings who have ever lived across every culture, every era, every tradition arrived at this, not as a belief, as a direct experience. And the unanimous verdict is this: once you recognize what you actually are, the suffering that was built on the misidentification does not gradually reduce. It loses its ground. Because the person who was suffering was never the real you to begin with. So from this episode forward in this series, when we talk about the deepest nature of what you are, we use one word. Not to reduce the profound to the simple, but to return the simple from where it was hidden. When I say awareness from here on, I mean what Buddha meant by Nirvana, what Jesus meant by the kingdom of heaven within, what the ancient seers meant by Brahman, what Laozi was pointing at with the Tao, what every awakened human being has been trying to show us for 5,000 years. Just awareness. Already here, already you, requiring nothing to access except the willingness to look. They were not divided. They were never divided. 5,000 years of brilliant, sincere, deeply realized human beings were all pointing at the same moon. We got distracted by the finger, by the language, by the institution built around the languages, by the wars fought over the institutions, and in all of that noise, the moon was always right there, unchanged, clear, available to anyone who stopped looking at the finger long enough to look at what they were pointing at. That is awareness. That is what you are. And from this moment forward, this is the only word we need: awareness. So share this video with someone who left a religion because it was made the truth too complicated, but still feels the pull of something real. Because what they left was not the truth. What they left was the translation. The truth was never lost. This is not an advice. This is the code. See you at sunrise.